Hey everyone, welcome to Empowered Astrology. My name is Christopher Mitchell. I'm here with Tom Jacobs,
Hello.
and today we're going to be talking about the different components of the astrology chart and giving an overview of that as we head into our basics series. So, over the following episodes, we're going to go into all of these concepts in more depth, piece by piece, but we thought that a good way to introduce everything here would be to take a look at the whole picture of the sort of the syllabus of what we're going to be unpacking over the following episodes. And to that end, we should probably start with the astrology chart itself, which is the thing that we read as astrologers, the way that we get a look at all of this. So I guess I'll just pass it over to you, Tom, and ask you to break down for us and tell us about your understanding, your idea of what the astrology chart is.
Yeah. For me, from a bird's eye view, it's a map in space time of the moment of a person's birth or an event. When we're talking about natal charts or birth charts. So, a map in space time. Like, oh, Mercury was there relative to where Venus was and the sun. Anyway, it's a map of the solar system at the moment of one's first breath, ideally. Uh, Sometimes birth certificates or people remember some minutes wrong, but basically the ideal is at the moment of the first breath.
Mm-hmm.
So you're imprinted with the energy of what's going on in the solar system, as we'll explore in future episodes. So the chart in tropical or Western, typically called Western astrology sometimes, tropical astrology is a wheel, and at the center of it is the Earth. The Earth is not depicted typically, but from our vantage point on Earth, all these things are seeming or appearing this way. They're in this setup or this constellation, these relationships from Earth's perspective. So when you see the wheel of a chart, birth chart, the middle is the Earth. That's where we are, and then all these things are kind of happening around us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think of it as a snapshot in time and space of the moment that we were born or the moment that something is born.
Exactly, snapshot. That's a better word than map. Yeah, thank you. That's a better word than map. Yeah.
But it serves as a map too of to read energies of our life, of our experience, of the energy that we're working with. So I think there's a reason that comes up too, as a way to think about it, because
Yeah.
it is a snapshot, but it can be used as a map of understanding, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So whenever you see a chart, you'll see that it's a tropical Western chart, round chart, wheel chart. You'll see it's divided into 12 slices, like a pie or a pizza. It's divided into 12 segments, and each one of those is called a house, and they're numbered from 1 through 12. And the first house starts in a particular place in every chart, and they'll be labeled. Tiny little one in the middle, near the middle, or somewhere, or on the outside, a 1 as a label. And the houses, I like to say, relate to or contain parts of life or arenas of life and activities and behaviors. I like to say relate to or contain or represent is a good way to think of it too. I've actually was tripping out about this the last few days, which I have before, like in the last almost 20 years. Sometimes I'll just be like, whoa, everything that you could choose to do as an activity would fit in one of those 12 categories. Like how many such a wide variety of endeavors humans get into, and there are 12 categories. So the houses are arenas of life or areas of life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you'll see setting the stage. You'll see this wheel divided into 12 segments.
Mm-hmm.
Planets, you'll see what are called glyphs, or little pictures representing them, and you'll recognize some of them, like Moon and Sun and Venus and Mars are quite obvious to us, but all of them have their own little picture, glyph, and you will see that particular chart holder's signature or blueprint or snapshot at birth where the planets were in the solar system, somewhere in the wheel. And so a planet represents part of a person's psyche and parts of a psyche, parts of the self, parts of the psyche. Yeah. Sometimes we can say attitudes or, parts of self, I guess would be how I would often say it. Parts of self. So there's a particular configuration, and then each of those planets, part of the self, will be, the phrase is, in a sign. So the signs are the signs of the zodiac, the 12 signs that make up the whole wheel. And they are always in the same order: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, etc., to Pisces, number 12. But they, given this 12-sector pie cut deal, the 12 sectors, the 12 sectors are always in the same place, but the signs move depending on what time of day the person was born. So even just in that, people who are born an hour or two apart will have different charts, even though the placements, even though, moon will be in this sign, same as the person an hour ago, but it will have moved. Maybe not terribly far, but so you have this setup for all kinds of uniqueness, all kinds of different patterns, different things with different people. That's where we start. Those are kind of our basic ideas that we learn about.
And with all of that, you get a whole bunch of different permutative possibilities.
Yes.
From a set of 10, 12, and 12, outcomes, however many, and it's not even
like
just
10
as
planets,
clear-cut
12
as
signs,
that,
12 houses. Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
But a planet could be at each of those houses and signs has all these little micro degrees too, so it could be at different spots within.
That's right.
So I feel like for anybody who's already got kind of steam coming out of their math brain trying to visualize that, I'd say you get on Google and you do an image search for astrology chart, and heck, maybe pull it up, and if you really are new to this and just jumping right in with us, pull up an image of an astrology chart and maybe try to follow along and see what we're talking about. Or I'm sure there's
good.
You could find some tutorials too that will walk you step by step how to read it. And we're going to zoom out here and talk about each of these components a little more one by one, but it can seem like a lot at first.
I want to add an aspect too before we zoom out, but I just want to say that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. And just to say, it can seem like a lot, but once you start to understand how to read the different pieces and components and bring it together, you can start speaking the language. So it's just a new thing to learn how to read, and we'll help you here to understand each piece of it.
Yeah. When anybody's talking to an experienced astrologer or advanced student, they look at it and they're like, you see the little gears turning in their mind, and then they have all these things to say. And when we're starting, we want to make sure that we're just doing one thing at a time and giving ourselves the freedom to learn and learn a new language, learn a new conceptual framework for talking about a person or something, talking about a personality. So we do one thing at a time in the beginning. It's just really important not to, because, whatever. Mars is in Sagittarius in my second house. What does it mean? Well, first just understand what Mars means, and we do that work on that, and then we understand what that second house means, and then we understand this. So we're always doing that. I had a math teacher who was who wanted to kind of break down the arrogance of some of my peers, and he was it was an advanced math class, and he wanted to get, on the very first day, he wanted to let them know that they need to sit there and be humble and listen. And so he said, how many numbers can you add up at the same time? And somebody was like, can you add up 3 numbers at the same time? Go up to the board, and he could actually only do 2 numbers at a time, and then the third number. And I thought it was a lasting lesson for me of we are very complex and we become intelligent and practice at things. But when we're learning something like this, especially a symbolic language, and I think that's what we're talking about with astrology. Like, how can you describe me looking at my chart? There's symbolic interpretation. There's all this stuff. So anyway, take the pressure off and just do one thing at a time. And that's why we've organized the future episodes in the way we have, where we'll talk about planets one by one for 10, 15 minutes, a half an hour, something, and to give you a sense of how to think about them, and then we'll build from there with houses and signs and everything else.
Yeah, it seems really complex at first, but once you start to learn the alphabet of it, it can come together and just start to come off the page a lot more easily.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I want to add in the aspects idea, and
yes,
then
go ahead.
Okay, and then I'll give it back to you. So aspects are the mathematical relationships between the planets and the chart and some other things, but basically there are certain mathematical relationships where that describe, so to speak, conversations within the psyche, or things about the person where they work together or don't know how to work together, or they're trying or something. And those are aspects. And when you look at a chart styles are very different. But when you see lines in the middle of the chart, either of different colors or different thicknesses, or if it's black and white, you might have a line with a triangle in the middle, another one with a square in the middle, separate. Those are aspect lines where the planets are, so to speak, seeing each other, which comes from the Greek. They're seeing each other. But I also like to think of parts of the person in conversation of different qualities and different ways of. But if there are no lines between them. And there are also, by the way, major aspects and minor aspects. You might find a chart with a bunch of things. Just study the major aspects first, and they're often called the Ptolemaic aspects, or the major aspects. And there are, what is it, 5?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, and then there are a bunch of smaller ones which clever people get into at some point. But anyway, I just wanted to add that in. So the part of the person, the planet, the part of life it's active in, the house, the way it behaves, the sign, the reason it does things is also the sign, and then the conversations that it might be having with other parts of the person or parts of the chart. Those are the 4 key ingredients to learn the language to create sentences and paragraphs later. Yeah.
And I think there was something in there that sparked for me around the conversations within the self between the different planets, right? Which, reminds me of, we've talked about the chart as a snapshot, as a map or a blueprint, and I think that's another good kind of keyword or idea to bring into how to understand the chart, is that it is a look into the personality or the psyche of a given individual, and can kind of be used to understand the what's going on in a person's internal world and in the energy that they carry, what's talking to what has what relationship with what, how does their inner kid show up, how does their drive show up, how does their ambition show up. Like, we all have these human components, but in what way are they conditioned, arranged, and interacting with each other? The chart can be a look at that, and that's why you get psychologists. Psychology has some cross connection with the field of astrology. Carl Jung was, I think, an avid, deep into astrological considerations, and he's also one of the founders of modern psychological thinking, and it can be a deep point of psychological understanding of the self and of others and of us, humanity in general.
And I'll just say briefly, there, whatever interpretive tendencies or whatever inclinations we have, like whatever priorities I have about life, will tend to color how I read. So you'll find many interpretations of all of these things we're talking about. between different teachers, writers, astrologers, practitioners. I just wanted to insert that because I hear all the time from clients like, well, so and so, or somebody told me that this was, and you're saying this is a really different thing, and I'm like, it's an interpretive thing. So it's just really important to keep aware of that.
Yeah, there's astrology works with archetypes, which
Yes.
can probably be said to have, you have a finite set of archetypes with infinite depth to each of them. Though perhaps you might also say there's an infinite set of archetypes, but potential archetypes.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah, I thought about that when you said that, but yeah.
I'm not sure either, but so I'm just going to throw it out there for the record.
I was like, yeah.
But then, so from any given chart, somebody who's looking at charts through the lens of like, maybe manifestational financial astrology will look at it and can pull out interpretation and meaning about material, earthly, like success oriented something or whatever, right? And then success as far as defined by the terms of somebody who's trying to get a read on that particular field of energy, whereas somebody else might be like, help me understand, help me go into some shadow work, or help me understand my deep patterning. The chart can be used for that too.
Yeah.
You can ask of it all kinds of different questions and read out of it all kinds of different things. It's very interesting that way.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. And yeah. I want to insert one note we didn't talk about inserting or covering, and it is, let's say you're kind of new to astrology, or you're somehow thinking, well, I think I would like to get my chart done. One note on how to pick someone to read your chart if you're going to employ someone to do it. And I just want to, it's just really important. One of the best things right now on the planet is this thing we call the internet, because people can put up an explanation on a web page what they do and why, and they have a little bio thing and sometimes a picture of themselves and maybe articles, and you can get to know their thinking and how they approach things, how they approach life. So I just want to say, like, because there's such it's endless, as many interpretive pathways as there are people, but then people change over time too, so it's more than that number. Anyway, finding the right kind of person, like, read their website, check out what they do and why they do it, and you'll get a sense of if you jive with this person. Anyway, I just want to insert that note because, as I said, people have inclinations towards certain interpretive things, or maybe I think all the time, maybe I happen to be an astrologer who is looking about money issues in a person's life and chart, or relationship, or both, or I spend a lot of time with family soul level contracts and other things, or like Chris said, shadow work, or I want to understand more about this thing about my patterns, or whatever it is, or you'll find people in different parts of the world who lean toward different interpretive, how do you say this, inclinations or something. I'm tending to think about money and how to help people with money issues, or I'm tending to think about relationship issues. So anyway, so it's just really good as you shop around, you think about that to see if you philosophically jive with somebody. And I just wanted to insert that note because we're talking about all these different ways of it. Well, we're not naming all these ways, but we're just referencing different ways of interpreting things. And some beginners or some people who are looking to find their footing might find this. And so I just want to insert that too.
Totally. Yeah. I like the categories that you came up with there. That was what I was reaching for, was money issues, is something one could read in a chart, or karmic issues or family issues, but yes, totally find what you resonate with, what feels like it'll be helpful to you with where you are in your journey now, and you don't have to take everybody's everything in. You find,
that's right,
what's our podcast called? Empowered Astrology. Like find what helps you feel more empowered, helps you heal for your
Yeah.
journey, for
Yeah.
your chart, for your makeup, for who you are, and work with that. You know, sometimes you'll be challenged, you'll bring in new things, you'll stretch, you'll grow, but
Yeah.
um, especially when you're just getting started, like I think trusting
Yeah.
your resonance is great.
And don't be afraid to write, to email or call if they have a number posted, to ask someone a question, to potential, because just like if you're going to hire a plumber, you might call that person and talk to the person first, or get a sense of, tell them what the issue is, and they may say, I don't do that, or something, or I'm not a plumber anymore, whatever it is, like whatever they do. Anyway,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess let's see. Was there anything else to talk about the chart itself? Maybe to just to wind back and reframe, and then we'll go into each thing
Mm-hmm.
piece by piece. So maybe by now you've pulled up an astrology chart. You're looking at it on Google Images or whatever. You see the circle. You see there's an outer ring with signs, and there's glyphs, right? Like
Yeah.
this is the symbol for Aries, this is the symbol for Taurus, this is the symbol for Gemini, and so on. And you get to know those the same way that over time you get to know what A, B, and C mean when you see these lines on a paper, right? They're just symbols. Glyphs is a word. So you got the ring of the signs, and then you've got the pie sections divvying it up.
Mm-hmm.
You've got angles that kind of help you see where the horizon is and what the point on Earth where you're standing is. So those 4 angles, basically the top of the chart is the sky if you were looking up at the moment that you were born, where you were born, and the bottom of the chart is like if you were looking down through the Earth at the sky on the other side of the Earth from where you were born at the moment that you were born. So that's how the chart is created as a snapshot of both time and space, and why we need the location as well as the time in order to create.
Tell a computer to make a chart.
Tell a computer to make. Thank God we can tell a computer to make the chart.
Sure.
They used to do all this math by hand, up until not even that far long ago. But we got computers now. So there's that, and then you got the pie slices of the houses, and you have the planets wherever they were in the sky on the moment that you were born, and the aspects between them, and all that, plus some extra sprinkles if you want to throw them in, and we can get into more advanced layers later. But that gives you the gist of what makes up a chart. And so I guess let's now kind of go into each of those categories one by one and talk a little more deeply about all of them.
Okay. Yeah.
Unless was there anything else you wanted to add on the overview level?
No.
Okay. So planets. Looking at the planets, and the sun and the moon are included in that category in astrological thinking, or astrological tradition at least. You've got the sun and the moon as planets because from the Earth they're seen as wandering bodies the same way that the other planets are. And so you got the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto counts in astrology. What can we say about those bodies and kind of as a category what they represent? I know we said a little bit before, but deepening into it again and expanding here.
I mean, do you want me to make a keyword list that's very brief? Is that what you're asking?
I don't know. Nothing in particular so much as how do you think of the planets and
okay. Well,
how would you start to help somebody to understand what what they represent in astrology and how to think about them?
Okay. Yeah. Like I said earlier, parts of self, or I'd say aspects of self. I don't want to confuse that keyword in there, but parts of self, or threads of self, or pieces of self, and they have different domains. They have different things like moon, not to go through the whole list, but just as an example, sun is a sense of self and ego development and vitality, and kind of if all the planets in the chart are in a meeting, the sun is the final decision maker, ideally. And obviously, in the solar system, it's the biggest thing. It's it's the center of the solar system, so everything orbits it. So ultimately, it's the final decision maker. Well, then Moon indicates or represents how a person processes emotion, what kinds of things may tend to make them happy, how they may nurture or desire or need to be nurtured, and it's just human needs, emotional, personal, nurturing things. So you can see those are two, just taking two out of that list, those are vastly different things. And so how what I'm basically doing when I'm listening to someone to help them with whatever issues they bring in is I'm looking for not only key words, but kind of key phrases and key ideas in what they're saying that puts me on to which of these parts of self are we looking for? What are we talking about here? And so somebody might have, for instance, so to speak, a sun problem or a moon problem, and there are myriad, endless things within what a moon problem might look like or a sun issue. But basically that's what I'm doing. I have these keyword lists and key phrase lists in my head, and I'm looking at the chart while they're talking, and I'm identifying what is the issue, what part of the self do we need to talk about. And so I've learned, and this is what people do, you learn what what each planet means, what it represents, what it means, and then you understand how to work with people given that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. Parts of self, rung out there for me as a kind of an important touchstone, I think, for differentiating those from like the other things we're going to talk about, the houses, the signs, is that planets represent parts of self, like
that's right.
Functions within us, aspects
yes, functions
of our
within
personality.
Us. Yes. Like the ego development function or the nurturing function, the feeling function. Yeah, exactly. That's another great way to say it.
Maybe parts of our psychology.
Yeah, sure.
Though I think, dancing around it here, but like, so they represent kind of like functions or aspects of us, and then we can look to the other things like the signs and the houses to see how those aspects of us are showing up.
That's right. That's right. Right, exactly. So everybody has a sun, everybody has a moon, etc., all down the list. And those, what we would call configurations, like how they're arranged and organized and how they show up in that birth chart, in that wheel, that will be different. But the sun function, like the moon feeling function, the sun identity function or sense of self function, is the same in every human. It's just modified through different lenses with different things going on. But yeah, there's a basic thing where we all have the same things in common, expressed differently. And that's really when we continue with it. Like you and I both have a feeling function. Everybody who's listening or watching this has a feeling function. And then things are modified because of these other factors. Yeah.
Okay, and then that's actually the first run of episodes after this one, is that we will be looking at those functions.
The planets,
and getting into each of those in a lot more detail.
Yeah.
And so then layering onto that, would you go to houses or signs next?
I get the question, is a house more important than the sign, or which is more important? quite often when I'm teaching. And so I just want to say at the outset, you cannot compare them. They're not ranked. They mean different things. And if you want a good laugh, you can see me almost tearing my hair out on a video from a few years ago on my YouTube channel called Houses and Signs Are Not the Same. If you want a good laugh. Because I turned it on in frustration and was blowing off steam with, I guess it's humorous, but I was really frustrated. But anyway, so yeah, I would go to houses first because it helps me understand behaviors or arenas of life. But you don't have to start there. I just feel like this is how I would construct a sentence. We'll talk about the houses more in a second, but houses and sign, this is how I do it. I'd say the part of the person's makeup or psychology or personality planet is active in the house, so we name what arenas of life it is comfortable in, it is most active in, what kinds of things it does, right? And then I'd say with the sign, in this way for these reasons. Sign. So signs are how and why a planet does something, where a house is kind of what it's doing or what part of life it's active in. So I would say a planet in a house behaving this way through the sign. So a planet in this part of life, house, and then the sign behaving this way for these reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important not to confuse them. And I'll just say, as people are learning astrology, this is why the question comes up so much. It is expedient for people writing books and websites to, I don't know, accidentally conflate them. Meaning what they'll say is, if you have Mercury in Libra or the 7th house, meaning those two are archetypically related, but they are different. The 7th house is about relationships, the facts of them, the realities of relating to people. The sign it is archetypally related to, it's not the same, is about learning to relate. So like my friendship with you, Chris, is different than, like, our friendship is a thing. How I try to connect with you is a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
How and why. So anyway, so then astrology students sometimes get stuck in their heads that houses and the signs are the same. Which should I treat as more important?
Your workplace is like a thing, and then in what way do you approach that work? Or
that's
your
right.
home life is a thing, and then what kind of energy does one bring to that
exactly.
domain of their life? So,
precisely.
and I see those all, like, and I've also kind of gotten to that place of, like, I understand your video about them not being the same thing. People will make those lists of if your north node is in Aries or the first house, or
right.
I've also been noticing lately that like people using squares and oppositions in the same thing, or trines and sextiles in the same thing when they're talking about aspects. So like if the sun is square or opposite your Venus, and that's also a little too simplified, and we'll get into that too at some point. But
I mean, honestly, it's better to write a book twice as long, so you're clear.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my brain says.
Mm-hmm.
So
given that, thinking about the houses then, and we have just already unpacked it a little bit here, but would you like to say more about your way of thinking about the houses and what they represent in the chart?
Well, it's just the parts of life, the arenas or areas of life.
Mm-hmm.
There's one of the sectors that relates to society and groups.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one that relates to ideas and beliefs. There's another one that relates to service and duty. So, again, I sometimes drift off and get my mind blown by thinking about how everything in life can be one of 12 categories, but they're just these categories. And I don't want to get into too much detail about any of them, but just to emphasize people who are learning, read a bunch of keyword lists. Read a bunch of keyword lists. And yeah, because there are lots of possibilities and lots of things that belong in different things. Like when you're reading a book or a website, they might list like 4 or 5 or 6, and that's a great place to start. Or I just said with those 3 examples, there are 2 each. That's a great place to start. But it's super important that we broaden our understanding by allowing. There's a bunch of keywords. There's a bunch of things. Remember, everything in life can be put in one of 12 categories as far as an activity or an area of life. Yeah. Yeah.
And we get a feel for it too. One might start with keywords or start with having a couple particular teachers or books or whatever,
Yeah.
and work off of those for a while. But the more one goes into their astrological practice, their lived experience learning of it, the more. And this isn't the only way to do it. There might be astrologers out there who work off memorizing ancient tables and stuff, but at least personally, I do recommend building a relationship to understanding the feel. Well, I don't know if I'll explicitly recommend that, because it's like whatever style works for you.
Yeah.
But you might develop a relationship to understanding the archetype and getting a sense or feel for what goes there, or comes out of there.
Yeah. Just to make sure we don't use the same 5 keywords all the time is what I'm getting at. Just to make sure we expand our repertoire in, because eventually, if you're reading charts for people, you're working with like 4 or 5 keywords for each house or each sign or whatever, it's going to be limited. And so we just want to make sure we're expanding our view and really understanding the broad swaths of things that fit within these categories.
Great.
Yeah.
And then
that's good. Yep.
Oh, for sure. Okay, so and then thinking about the signs as well now. So what's that layer, or how can we bring that into the conversation here?
Yeah, I said how and why the planet's behaving, the part of the self is behaving in the house, in the area of life. But think about methods and motivations. I steal those keywords from Steve Forrest, my teacher, and methods and motivations. So how and why, and what drives this planet? Why is it doing this? Why is it doing that? And so again, many possible keywords and key phrases for any of the 12 signs, because all possible methods and motivations fit into one of 12 categories again. So good to start with a trusty list and then expand it out over time. Same thing with the houses and the planets. So, a planet behaving in a certain way for a certain reason. Like, why does it do that? Oh, it's so. This is a very thing I think a lot of people have been exposed to as an example. The stage example of a planet would be the actor, and then the house is the set or the setting, and then the sign is like the costume and character's motivation. So you might say, like planet A wearing the costume of this other planet, right? So Mars with a mercurial motivation, or Saturn with a Venus-like inspiration, or Moon with a Jupiter-like inspiration. So we kind of piece it together in that way.
I think I've heard, or I've thought about it in like the actor on what part of the stage are they on? Okay, they're on that, this part of the stage, and it's this actor, and then like a spotlight with different color filters over it.
Yes.
So is there a red light on them, or a blue light on them, or a yellow light on them, kind of tinting how that character is seeming or showing up.
Yes.
Setting the mood of that character.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, I like that too. Yeah.
Well, and I like the costume thing too. I don't know if I'd heard that one. It's helpful.
Yeah, I don't know where I came across that. I mean, some writer, with a well-established book. I was devouring stuff when I was learning, and that was in there. I don't remember who it was, but yeah. What
had I just been thinking of? Oh, right. I was thinking. So we got parts of self, and let's say we all have a part of us that wants to connect, or communicate or something, right? A planet. And then, but then we already have ways that we kind of think about things like this in different terms, where it's like we can say, oh, that person is an introverted connector or is an extroverted connector. They're shy or they're bold or they're reserved or moderated,
Yes.
And so it's kind of like that, where we have these different planetary functions, and we lay over them the character of them.
Yeah. 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 Is there a question in there, or you're just kind of...
No, just synthesizing and vibing with it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So that's part of the layering there. So
Yes.
I think so that covers that. And then, do we want to unpack aspects any further?
I'd like to list the major or Ptolemaic aspects. And everyone who's listening will notice they're in 30-degree increments. But I just would like to list them for the record and mention a quality of energy with each, and then move on. Yeah.
Sure.
So we have what's called a conjunction, which is when planets are next to each other. They're, adjacent, within a certain number of degrees, where people have different ideas, and we'll talk about that later down the road as not just a basics topic, but there are different opinions on these numbers. But within a certain they're like joined at the hip. They merge together. You can't really talk about one without talking about both at the same time.
So this is around the wheel of the chart. We've got, let's say, two different planets. We've got the sun and the moon. Keep it real simple. And you talk about the conjunction. That's like if you've got the sun in one place
next to each other,
and the moon is in
right
a similar
there.
place right next to it in the chart.
That's right. That's right. And that means those functions of the personality or parts of the self work in tandem. And so we can't address that person's sun, ego function, without moon, feeling function, and vice versa. It's really like joined at the hip. It's really like they are holding hands together forever. Or in one of those three-legged picnic races, where one of their legs is tied to the other one, and they're running together like three. You know what I'm saying? A three-legged race all the time.
A potato sack together.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, bro. Potato sack. Yeah, yeah. And so they cannot function independently. Okay, so that is one. The sextile, so roughly 0 degrees, but some degrees. Then the second one, that's a conjunction. Sextile is 60 degrees, roughly. And there's a stimulating quality to the connection. And the way I think of it is, parts of the self have a relationship where they can stimulate each other. If one says, I think this thing's a great idea, the other one might say, you just made me think of this other thing. They can have a go, like stimulating back and forth. Parts of the person stimulate each other. That's what we're talking about. Roughly 60 degrees. The next one is square, 90 degrees. And the way this happens is they have different perspectives, and they see things that the other one wouldn't see. Like angles on how and why to do things, or what's worth doing. So parts of the psyche might behave in the following way. One says, I think I should approach this topic this way. And the other part says, you know what? If you subtracted this thing or added this other thing, I think you'd be more successful. And it can be very constructive, and we grow a lot from learning change over time, being willing to change and open. But it can also sometimes feel frustrating, as if parts of us don't agree on how to do something. So we have to honor the different parts of us, but there's a thing where they might have different ways of doing things. Is a great way to think of it. But they can see something the other person hadn't entertained, probably. That's a square, 90 degrees. A trine is 120 degrees or so. And I think of those as helping, boosting, cheerleading, like encouraging, which isn't always good. Just like stimulation isn't always good. And if you're getting into astrology basics, you'll find all the time that sextiles and trines are good, that squares and oppositions are bad. It's kind of the mental key, the mental shorthand that our brains do. Oh, okay, right. Those are bad, or these are easy. Those are hard. We don't do that over here in our workshop in Empowered Astrology, but we understand how they could be healthy or unhealthy, helpful or not helpful, pleasant or unpleasant. There are varieties for each of these. But anyway, the trine, one part of the psyche says, "Yeah, I feel really good today." Yeah, and the other one goes, "Yeah, look at you. Like your hair looks great. You put the perfect outfit. Yeah, run with that." So they're somehow encouraging each other. By the same token, one can say, "I feel like a loser today," and the other one would be like, "Yeah, I totally get what you mean. Look at you." So it's like they encouraging and reinforcing sometimes. I love it when the planets speak through me. No, I'm kidding. So that's a trine, about 120 degrees. Energy can flow. There could be a boost. There can be like cheerleading or something. They seem to understand each other. They seem to speak the same language. And then the last of the major or Ptolemaic aspects is the opposition, which is about 180 degrees, obviously half of the 360-degree circle. And these have different opposite ways of doing things. So you can think of it, parts of the self disagree about how to do certain things. They may learn to collaborate. They may just argue, or a person may feel stuck. But these parts have literally the opposite ways of doing things, mostly. Mm-hmm. And there's a benefit here of they have such different perspectives. They can collaborate and come up with some really cool stuff, but it's very different perspectives. And we find a bridge, we find a blend. But at first it might look like they just don't speak the same language, or they can't talk to each other. They just have different ways of doing things. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like I want to add this example of a way to think about it as with a clock as like a point of reference, so that if you got a big hand and a small hand, two planets in aspect to each other at 12 o'clock. So I just also realized that this we're recording this as a YouTube video and a podcast, and it'll be a podcast with video, but some people might just listen to the audio.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes I'm going to move my hands around, and
okay,
I'll try to describe what I'm doing for the audio-only listeners as best I can. But
if they've ever seen a clock, they'll be able to follow along.
Great, yeah. So sometimes if you've got the big hand and the small hand together up at the 12, that's what we call 12 o'clock. And that would be like a conjunction in astrology. And then, let the big hand stay where it is at 12. It's the sun or something, and the moon is moving. And the moon gets to 2 o'clock, and we've got the sextile. Mm-hmm. Sun at 12, moon at 2. The moon gets to 3, the planet gets to 3, 12 and 3, we've got a square, because it's 1/4 the way around the circle of the clock. That's a fourth of a square. The planet keeps moving, and it gets to the big hand. The small hand gets to the big hand gets to 4, and the small hand stays at 12. At 4 o'clock, we've got the trine, because it's a 1/3 of the circle and part of a triangle. And it keeps going, and it gets to 6 o'clock, and then we've got the opposition, and it's kind of self-explanatory. And so that can be a way to think of it, because just like there are 12 numbers around the face of a clock, there are 12 signs around the circle of the astrology chart.
Exactly.
And aspects, there's 30 degrees in between each of those signs,
Yeah, thank you.
360 degrees total, and that's where you get the 60, 90, 120, 180 major Ptolemaic aspects.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. Thank you.
Yes. So that's all. There you go. In a nutshell, that's a lot of the what we're going to be covering in more depth over the following episodes, and an overview of the major components in the chart. So yeah, there's other layers that can be kind of added, other points that can be added in. There's some other details in there to discuss and break down, but that's a good way into starting to think about the chart, and I think gives an overview of what we'll be talking about for the next however many weeks, months, episodes as we work on them here. So thank you for joining us and for tuning in, and we got a Patreon thing that we're working on too, so if you want to tune into that and get some additional content, I think we're thinking about putting out monthly forecasts. It's still in the works, but we're gonna probably figure something out. I'll put links in the descriptions, and follow those for more if you're interested. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Great.
Thank you, Tom.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Bye-bye.
And catch you next time. Thanks.